Hi, I'm Paul Rubenstein, and I am really a very lucky person. I'm the Chief People Officer of Visier. I'm a recovering consultant. You're probably going to Google me on LinkedIn or something like that right now. And I spent a long time working with large HR organizations on HR transformation. This was really about helping HR liberate the capacity and get rid of the administrative work and low value work and invest in systems and delivery at scale, shared services, sometimes even outsourcing, so that they could unlock the power of HR and make an impact on talent and business outcomes. And at the end of that was the end of every HR transformation slide. In fact, HR transformation and all the software that has come under that, it's been a record. Like, it's never been a bigger market. Yet, when I look back at that work, I get a little bit frustrated because I don't really believe that any of my customers have made the impact they sought out for. Yeah, we made address changes and department changes and promotions more efficient by creating self-service and actually pushing that work out into the people managers. But did we elevate all of the small decisions that happen out in the field so that they are more connected to a North Star, so that decisions are made based on data instead of instinct and inertia, so that those decisions are fairer and more just? I don't know that we did. And in fact, I think we still have, what we're calling the people impact gap. We invested a lot in HR and systems and learning and you name it. But there exists this gap between individual and collective performance that HR hasn't been able to hit yet. But there also exists this rich digital footprint. And I think now we're entering an era where HR can close that gap. But I think it requires a little bit different thinking. I think it requires us to rethink the operating model for HR. And by the way, I don't have all the answers, but I do think HR can be inspired by the CFO and what the CFO accomplished. And so I want to walk you through that. But before I walk you through that, I want to start you with the most basic consulting graph that I used in all those years of consulting. So like every good graph that goes to the board, it goes up and to the right. I mean, that's how graphs work. They should always go up and to the right. You're going to increase your diversity, you're going to increase your revenue, you're going to increase your retention, whatever it is, it goes up and to the right. And then somebody comes in with a strategy to go from A to B, right? You all know this. And by the way, if you're on one side of that graph, you're a hero, and on the other side, you're a goat. It's just the way it works. But it's really frustrating when you present this strategy at the board level or a management team or whatever it is, and then you wake up one day and realize you're powerless unless you can connect all of the small decisions that represent the dots in that line to that line. Real corporate performance happens when you can connect all of those small choices to the big impact you desire. I mean, that's it. That's consulting and strategy in a nutshell. That's execution in a nutshell too. Alignment, aligning small decisions to a collective outcome. Companies that do that well outperform. It's funny, we think about those small decisions that we make every day, and we live in an age where we have more help making decisions than we've ever wanted because of this rich digital footprint. And God, if you ignore the data in front of you, you're almost shunned. I mean, think about going out for a drive with your mom. She takes the wheel and you pull up Waze or Google Maps or something and she's like, I already know the way I like to go. I mean, you laugh. It kills you, right? Think about talent decisions. How often do we hear, I know my people better than the data, or this is our tradition, or my people have expectations, or the data's wrong? We can't go on like this. So I ask you, in this rich digital age where we have an employee footprint that's just as good as the consumer footprint, how do we turn the corner and elevate HR from efficiency to impact? How do we close that people impact gap? I think there's some inspiration to be found in the CFO. Like the CFO did something amazing. They turned, no offense to the accountants in my family, boring accounting data into business data. And then they connected that financial data to strategy. How did they do it? Let's take a look at it and see how we can apply that to HR. I would argue that the real power of the CFO comes from 4 things. Not saying yes or no to expenses. Yeah, that's helpful too. But the real power comes from 4 things. Cadence, the rhythm with they publish data. Curation, what they choose to put in that which they send out. Context, how they take numbers and put them into some reference point or put words around numbers. And conversation, the behavior of using numbers in your decision making and in your meetings and in your culture. So let's double click on each of those. Let me start with cadence. CFO is awesome. 12 times a year, they publish that P&L, or at least quarterly. And 12 times a year, you have to stop and reflect. Did my pricing decision increase revenue? Did my staffing decision increase revenue? What was I able to do about my expenses? What was I able to do about my leverage model? Whatever that is, that P&L leader decision you're making, that management decision that you're making, you have to stop and reflect. Because from one month to the next, did my decisions actually yield the outcome, the collective outcome? Small decisions, big impact. Because you either reflect and correct, or you're out. This is that moment where you go on the path between hero and goat. And by the way, every month, that rhythm helps everyone stop and reflect, which is really important. Because we often make day-to-day decisions and don't stop for that mindful moment to say, how have my decisions added up? We don't always do that in talent until it's too late. I mean, think about it. Do we send out data all the time that's interesting? No, often we hold on to HR data because it's boring, it's slow data. But imagine you had a resignation problem and you're like, hey, everyone look at the resignation problem, but you never sent that out each month. Nobody knows what normal looks like. You didn't give, something isn't exciting until people know what boring looks like. So there's a real power that the head of HR can do by publishing each month to get people used to seeing data, to get them to hold up a reflection around that. I'll give an example of that in just a little bit using diversity data. But it's not just the frequency that you send it out, it's also how you curate it. The CFO is very smart in that if it's a growth-focused organization, they'll be focusing on, hey, what are all the things and decisions you would make around increasing sales? And so the spotlight of the data goes over here. If it's a cost-focused organization, it'll go down over here. Hey, listen, you need to cut every nickel, and every nickel counts, right? Or it might be on pricing, or whatever it is that's important to the CFO, they will focus on that. And they don't necessarily send the same information to each business unit. Each FP&A leader curates it to connect the strategy with the focus area and put a spotlight on what's important to get to that next milestone, to get on track or outperform the competition. I mean, look, in talent strategy, we say sameness does not yield greatness. So just a blanket statement about, we need to improve retention or reduce turnover, that isn't always true. There are some areas where turnover is healthy and some areas where it's not. And we need to be able to distinguish that. Some roles, and so the data can help guide that. And it can't be just the same data for everyone. It needs to be curated based on that individual situation. And that curation power focuses the decision. And then there's context. The worst thing a CFO can do is just send out a spreadsheet. The best thing the CFO does is they send out the monthly analysis. Some words, hey everyone, this is where we were on our journey. And we think this is a trend. And here's the data that shows that trend. And by the way, here's your next set of actions. Giving context to that data, here's what's happening externally, helps center the person helps center the person who's receiving that data so that they internalize it, they understand it deeply, and then they take action. And you can guide that next action. You don't send out the spreadsheet and then come back a week later and say, well, here's what you should do about it. If you're trying to connect them to strategy and align them, you've got to put it all in one flowing motion. And then finally, the CFO does something really important. They use it in conversation. Let's start with the numbers. The earnings call starts with the numbers. We release the numbers and then we give commentary. It creates a rhythm of, hey everyone, where's our top line? What's our leaderboard? Where are we on our revenue? Let's start, because that sets the tone for the conversation. Your conversation about talent doesn't always go that way. I think about the heads of HR meetings that I've observed over the years. The HR business partners talk about here's what's top of mind in each division. Then shared services talks about how many transactions they process. And then, maybe rewards and leadership is talking about the programs they released. But when the head of HR starts with the numbers, hey everyone, here's the revenue, here's the headcount, here's the turnover, here's the engagement score. Let's all get centered on what's really important. It's only then can everybody attach whatever they're going to talking about to not what's urgent, but what's important. It sets a different tone. And by the way, when you use it in conversation with the whole organization, it elevates everyone's awareness of what's important. It connects everyone to the North Star when everybody sees the same numbers, whether it's about financial data or talent data. So what's HR to do? I know what HR is doing today. Right? You talk to any HR leader and they're still in search of this HR efficiency. In fact, lots of software companies are telling you, hey, we can do more efficient transactions. We can replace some more people, and we can replace your old technology with something that does the same thing better, faster, cheaper. HR efficiency. A lot of people I hear, hey, we got to finish the HRIS implementation. Paul, we can't do anything until our data is perfect, or until we're done deploying the next module, or we have a new upgrade we have to absorb. We're waiting for the HR business partners to be better at data or be more strategic, so we're sending them to training and upskilling them. Or you know what? Look, we're really focused on the employee experience. We want your experience with learning and all the transactions. We want a consumer-like experience with all of the tools and things and toys that we use in a company. None of those things actually drive corporate performance outside of HR. They may make people more satisfied with HR. They may make HR cheaper to run. But you quickly hit a ceiling in how cool your internal website looks like, or how easy your ticketing system looks like, or how many times you can ask, were you satisfied with your transaction with HR? That actually doesn't drive individual performance, or we quickly hit a limit with stickiness, because you can do everything you want on a corporate level around engagement and culture, etc. But it's really the moment at which a decision happens around who's going to work on what, who's going to get promoted, who's going to get hired. Those things that happen outside of HR that really make a difference. And so I ask you, are we closing the gap on those decisions? Are we making that impact? The CFO has figured out how to turn that financial data and use it in motion to connect those decisions and elevate those decisions and hold a mirror up to those decisions. HR can do the same thing. I don't have all the answers, but I do have 4 motions that I'd like to explore with you that HR can do today with the head of HR's leadership. The first one I want to talk about is collapsing your distance to impact. Man, there is nothing more frustrating than being head of HR, because you can say everything you want, but by the time you say it and it gets to an employee, through a series of frontline, through a senior vice president, senior director, Senior manager, manager, team leader, employee, it's like the old telephone game. It's distorted. It may not have all of the urgency that you were looking for. And people have optionality often because they're like, hey, my manager said this wasn't that important. They didn't actually hear it with the tone and urgency that you were talking about it, or the context. So how, as head of HR, can you collapse your distance to impact, like the CFO does? Well, let's examine the classic HR function, right? Head of HR talks to the CEO. Head of HR talks to the HR business partners. HR business partners talk to all the other direct reports. You as head of HR can't be everywhere all the time in every conversation. So you cascade that information. It's a very classic hierarchical move. But by the time that message gets down, there's some optionality. It doesn't get there with the tone you're looking for. One person's urgent is another person's important. So how do you collapse your distance to impact? Well, I'll give you an example the same way the CFO does. They publish direct, they speak direct. I know you can't get on the phone with everyone, but you can send everyone a letter every month. I do it every week. Here's what's important, here's the data, here's some narrative next to the data that you're looking at. And sometimes it's a simple message. So I'll give you an example for gender diversity. First time head of HR at a tech company. I came out of consulting. I said, let's tackle gender diversity. Everyone tells me, come on, you're kidding me. Gender balance in tech has been a problem for ages. There's nothing you can do. Supply, I heard all these excuses. And I was like, no, we're smart. We can do something. But I realized that I can't just use words. And pledges and statements are nice. But I realized that it's data that lights the path to accountability and change. So I started publishing data. We used workforce planning to set goals, not with gender overall. For me, I realized that we would only be as diverse as the population that was in hiring and promoting positions, the people managers. So we set a goal. We started publishing against that goal. And we didn't just publish to a single employee or to the management team, we published to the whole company. Hold up a mirror so that people understand what the whole commitment is, and create an environment where, hey, you're about to go hire somebody, here's our diversity statistics. The next choice in meeting them or not is up to you. Connect the small choice to big decisions. And it worked. We were able to improve the composition of our people managers in terms of gender diversity, and the knock-on effect was it improved our gender diversity overall. Again, that's an example of sometimes you feel powerless when you're talking about a trend, but if you can get that trend in everyone's hand and get them into the headspace of making that choice, that they can impact that trend, that next choice is up to them, that's collapsing your distance to impact. The second thing I offer you is that people data is business data. HR has a decoder ring, a secret decoder ring, so that you can understand all the language of job levels and career levels and comp ratios and things. And by the way, that data alone, I don't know, I think it doesn't sit that well, right, for making people decisions. By the way, if you're a people manager, you get your operations data, you get your sales data, you get your financial data, and then you beg HR for data to, mash up against it, right? But when HR is able to take the work data and bring it in, the productivity data, you can start to shape better decision making at a granular level. I'll use a very simple example of what happens when you take a common thing like comp ratio. Where does this person sit in a pay band or a market to market with productivity data? Or, I don't know, let's use sales quota attainment data as the first one. When you start to bring those two together and see, are we being effective with our use of capital? You want to talk about human capital? Don't talk about human capital, talk about actual cash. Is cash yielding what we want it to? Lay it out for sales managers if you want to help them make better decisions that aren't about, this guy feels like a seller, to what does the data really say? Or this, look, the people in the green, yeah, they're well paid, but they're knocking out of the park. they're attaining. How do we replicate that? The people down in orange, hey man, they're knocking it out of the park too. They're the ones that are really going to get the counteroffer, get ahead of them. They're the ones that are going to get poached and listen to that call. The people in the red, man, up on top there, did we set base salaries too high? Is it too cushy? Are these people, are they not hungry enough, or do we make it too easy to live on your base as a salesperson? And the people down on the bottom like, hey man, what's going on there? But it doesn't just have to be something like sales data. I work in a tech company. We use it with Jira data. Like, how many story points did you close? Who is an effective coder? Who is highly productive relative to the pay versus who is paid a lot but isn't that productive, and why? And again, this might not tell you the whole story. You still have to ask the right questions about each quadrant. But it's way more informative look at performance than just a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rating. No doubt, it's a noisy world. I will tell you, head of HR, man, people call you for everything. And it's interesting, like, I find myself being held accountable for trends that aren't even happening in our company, they're happening in other companies. And nowhere was this more evident to me than how noisy a world it was than at the start of the Great Resignation, right? You know, it's like, oh, Paul, Google is having this problem, so we better do something about it. I'm like, we're not Google, we're Visier. Rachel just quit. Okay, Rachel is the trend. We have to change all of our programs to deal with Rachel. And Rachel, really, it was just about money. I'm like, oh, well, you know, your sample size is this big. Do you really see the whole trend? Is this what we how we should be reacting to it? Well, here's an example of helping all of our managers elevate their decision making by giving them context and curating data. When we unpacked the trend, we found that it was actually only 2 of our career levels, of our many career levels, that was driving over 50% of our turnover. If you took those 2 career levels out, turnover was normal. So, you know, we're not going to scream about it with somebody in the purple line saying, oh, we have to do counteroffers, that's the trend. No, it's the people in the yellow. And so it's cute for me to get up in front of the company and say, this is the trend of these people, do something about it. But you know, if you're a people manager, you look at this with skepticism. You say, I know my people. They're not in that line. So how do you help people connect that small choice with that big trend and that big impact? And help them find the signal in the noise. Again, we talked about curation before. It's telling a story with the data and publishing direct to people. So for example, I woke up one night and I'm like, I'm going to write an analysis the same way the CFO does, and I'm going to send it to every single people manager. And I'm going to tell them, like, look, here's the actual trend and the reasons people are leaving, both the narrative and the data, not just data alone. And by the way, I'm going to say, here is what you should do about it. Here are 5 things you could do about it. And here's the links to all those resources that you may have forgotten we have here as a company. And then we're going to take it one further and turn people analytics into person analytics. We're going to break up for you in your team the real issues and where you should pay attention. Don't worry just about the loud person. You should be looking at the quiet person too, based on what the data tells you. We do this with customers all the time, customer data. Why not with employee data? The people in the orange, hey, you know, it's not about pay for them. It's about career mobility. They haven't been promoted in quite a while, and that's their pleasure center, our research tells us. That's what helps them connect in this economy to feel like they keep moving forward. The people in the red, yeah, it might actually be about pay. And for all those people, did you have the career conversation that's part of our data? And we were able to show who had it, who didn't. And we tracked these interventions, and we bent the curve in the middle of the Great Resignation and avoided what could have been a disaster for us. Again, using data and turning a trend into individual experience and helping busy managers who were panicked at the time, combating all the data coming from internal and external, and helping them find signal in the noise. We will only make decisions about people using data to the extent that we see ourselves in that data, that we can connect with that data, that there's face validity for us as human beings, that the data says something that represents us. We have a responsibility and, quite frankly, a capability to reveal a deeper human truth to ourselves, and to the rest of the organization through data. And let me show you where I'm going with this. Like, seriously, did you ever look at your HRIS record and say, that's me, that's what I want on my tombstone, that's my resume, a series of performance ratings, salary changes, title changes, and org chart changes? You are more than the sum of that. And I think HR has to realize that they don't own all the data about work, and that they need to, if they're going to talk about people data, they need to look outside of HR and understand how people view their data, not HR views their data. For example, like you wrote a bunch of emails today, you coded something, you made a sales call, you helped a patient, you produced a widget, you sold a car, whatever that might be. Those sit in a collection of systems. And that is much closer to who you are and your footprint on the economic outcome of that company, or your footprint on the people around you, than what sits in the HRIS and the classic HR data. I mean, we all wear Apple Watches, and we are reminded to stand up, or to move, or to go exercise, or to prevent a heart attack even. But in this day and age, we talk about burnout a lot. We're worried about employee burnout. But do we provide a mirror into the digital day of every employee? Are we able to sit there and hold a mirror up to the conflict that they're having and show them what sentiment analysis says about themselves and whether they are in danger of burnout? Do we actually even understand our organizations? Man, the org chart is dead. If you're not using network analysis to understand who is connected to who and the strength of those connections, what are you doing? You're missing out, especially in hybrid work. Like, if you can't see everyone working in this world, how do you know who's on the fringes? How do you know who is actually at the center of the organization? And think about it, we're in a recessionary economy. I know all of you are looking at some sort of rationalizing your workforce, some cuts. How often have we regretted the cuts we made because we used an X-ray, not an MRI? We didn't have a three-dimensional view of the impact that individual has on customers and everyone else. These are the tools that will help us understand a deeper human truth about ourselves. And man, talk about diversity. Think about belonging and inclusion first. Imagine holding up your network map and understanding who you include and don't, and the diversity of your own network. This is the type of data that is more human and will change culture and performance. Employees don't want fiction anymore about their career either, right? They want real things. They don't want a fictional map that says analyst 1, analyst 2, analyst 3. They want to be able to see, hey, from my job, who stayed and who left? And what jobs did they take in the organization? Or that's the job I want over there. Show me all the jobs the people who got that job have. They want real facts. They want a deeper human truth. They want data that they can relate to that's not HR speak, but work speak and human speak. So 4 motions. Collapsing your distance to impact. People data is business data. Find the signal in the noise. Reveal a deeper human truth. All plays that you can do today. And this notion of a human truth doesn't just activate individual employees, which are the important link to connect small moments to big outcomes and big impact. It actually connects the whole organization. I think it's important that HR think about their audiences. I do a great job. HR does a great job, I think, with board and investors and with senior management. HR often does a pretty good job with itself getting at the data that it wants. But it really needs to invest as much in getting out there to engage and deliver insights to frontline managers and to employees themselves. That's where the rubber meets the road. That's where the choices about stay or go, perform or not perform, extra effort, it happens in the field. All those points of connection between frontline managers and employees, that's where data can make as big a difference or more of a difference than in the boardroom. So what does this mean? Is HR actually set up to deliver on these types of motions I described? We owe a debt of gratitude to the three-legged stool and all the work that Ulrich did to help us transform HR to become more efficient and get to this point. And this notion of HR business partners that are focused on talent, that shared services to deliver things at scale, expertise and COEs that can go deep in a domain and deliver also at scale. But I think we may have hit the limits of that because it is built around efficiency. It was born out of the desire to create efficiency. So what is next? The CEO expects the next generation of heads of HR to be able to unpack business strategy into a talent strategy that can be granular and specific enough that lots of decisions distributed across the organization can connect back to it. The CFO did that with financial data. HR can now do that with people data. And that is how they will close that impact gap. Look, some companies are doing this well already, others are not. Companies that rely on tradition, inertia, or have a set of excuses, we're not ready to use data in a better way, or we have to upskill, or we have to finish X, Y, or Z, those companies will be lapped. They will be beaten by companies that really help elevate the small decisions that every people manager and employee makes. The companies that are able to deliver insights for better people decisions will outperform those that rely on inertia and tradition and instinct. Look, you made it this far in this presentation because you inherently know that HR is ready to deliver on the promise of past investments. All the data is there. The people are ready to consume the data. The desire to outperform other companies because you're better at engaging people and making better people decisions, the time for this is now. Thank you for listening. I hope you're inspired to do better. You can do better tomorrow with data just by publishing, just by talking about it, just by using it in everyday conversation. And if you want to learn more, please visit Visier.com and we're glad to help.